from the COCs. I do really appreciate you hopping on just with such short notice. But a focus of that, we're going to be looking at the contracts that are very geared towards the ESSO contracts or the grantees. So just wanted to kind of give you that information, knowing that we are going to touch base next week and go over more specifically the things that have the HP and RR language. So just a mention of that before we get diving in.
Yeah. And so we're getting a couple of chats in the chat box that says folks cannot see the screen. So if you guys, if you can let us know like what exactly is that you see. Are you on the Zoom link? How did you guys get to the meeting? That will help us identify the issue. And right now what you should just say is download should start automatically. I'm moving my mouse. Okay, great. So I think you guys are on the right screen. I'll go ahead and pull up the contract just so everybody can make sure. So let's just move that over. Give me just 1 second. All right, so if you cannot see a Word document with the contract language that says ESG activities there right at the top, let us know in the chat box. Okay, so we are going to jump right into the contracts. The purpose of this hour is to kind of show folks what has changed between last year and this year, so that when you get contracts, you aren't surprised by these changes. So again, we are recording this webinar. It will go online, so you can come back to it at any point and answer these questions. And then, of course, you have the wonderful asset management team who are going to be managing these contracts. Some of them are on the call as well, but they have been super helpful in helping us to get these changes. So just a quick shout out to your lovely asset managers. Just a couple of updates before we get moving with all of this. There is going to be a really quick turnaround for these contracts. We fully expect for them to go out on Monday, but with everything that's been going on, our contracting team has just been slammed. So I do apologize for that. Hopefully your AMs have reached out to you and already kind of given you a heads up that they're going to be coming in and they're going to be needing to be turned around quite quickly. So last year, folks were using DocuSign. I think most of the contracts were signed using DocuSign. If you are an agency that does not use DocuSign, which is the electronic version where you can just get the contract through email, sign it electronically, and send it right back, if you are an agency that has not used that or does not know how or isn't sure what that even is, please reach out to your asset manager today, if at all possible. We will have to send those contracts to you overnight via FedEx or something like that. So we need to know sooner rather than later if that's something that you can't do. And so for folks who are new, if there are any new folks on the phone, if you don't know who your asset manager is yet, feel free to reach out to myself or Galen and we can connect you with the right people.
Get in here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
One more time.
And so Galen's putting our email addresses in the chat box right now, so in case you guys don't have them, then you do now. Okay, so those are the biggest updates, so we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. So the biggest, and again, as Galen mentioned, we're going to be primarily focusing on the shelter and outreach contracts, reporting forms, et cetera, just because there's only a few folks who do the prevention and rapid rehousing, but if you guys are on the phone, it's going to be almost identical. The formatting is going to be the same. The types of changes that we're making are going to be the same. It'll just have different language in it because you guys are doing different activities. So the first and biggest change that we've made in our contracts this year is to align the contract language with the HUD regulation language. We had the opportunity to have some TA over the summer, and that was one of the biggest recommendations they made to us, is to just make sure that it's crystal clear exactly what can and cannot be funded in ESG. So if you ever have any questions about it, you can come to Section 7. This is Exhibit B of the contract, so that's that scope of work section. The first exhibit is the boilerplate language, insurance and liability and all of that good stuff. Exhibit B is really where you get into the nuts and bolts of what the program is. And so this is Section 7, so you can see we have aligned all of this language to match exactly the ESG activities. Now that does look a little different than some of the language we've used in the past. So for example, the biggest difference has been with the emergency shelter component. We have used the language of shelter operations, staff operations and essential services. And so this is going to be the first year where that staff operations line is not a line item. That will need to be aligned with either essential services, the staff who are running these essential services listed here. So you've got case management, child care, education services, employment services, outpatient, legal services, life skills training, mental health, substance abuse, transportation, and services for special populations. So it is quite robust what staff can and are eligible to be paid to do under this ESG contract. But if you do have any questions about those changes, definitely let us know, because I know that that's kind of been how we've been operating for a while now, and that doesn't necessarily take away the money that you all will have for your staff, but that will change the way that you're monitoring it, basically. And the reason that we're doing this is because most of our shelters, unless they're a local government, don't actually have admin dollars, are not eligible to apply for administration dollars. And so to make sure that we're not inadvertently funding admin activities through ESG, we have just reverted back to the specific regulation language to ensure that it's crystal clear what staff is actually doing. So the next section there, so renovation, we don't do renovation through ESG, frankly, because it's such a small amount, and we know that shelters need a lot of money to operate. So if you are a shelter and you do have a renovation that's coming up, again, reach out to your asset manager. There are plenty of other funds that we have as the Division of Housing that can be used for renovation of shelters. And so make sure to chat with your asset managers about that if that is something that you guys would need in the future, but that's why it's reserved here. And then, of course, shelter operations, which is just basically whatever you guys need to operate your shelter. Any questions or anything so far?
No.
Okay. Okay, cool. So here's the street outreach stuff, and again, it's pretty straightforward, just really clarifying what can and cannot be paid for through ESG, so definitely take a look at that. This is the same language that was in the Excel budget sheet that you all filled out, but if you do have any questions or any points of clarification, just let us know, and we're happy to help walk you through those. So here, this is the HMIS stuff, the Homeless Management Information Systems, exactly what can and cannot be funded through that, and then, of course, administration. So again, unless you are a local government or a COC, you are not eligible to apply for this source of funding, so this won't apply to most folks, but that is here if you guys have any questions. All right, and so section 7.1.5 is the bonus funds section. We only had about 10 folks receive bonus funds this year, and we're going to be doing a bonus funds specific webinar probably around the middle of April to work more targetedly with those folks who are setting up these programs and who are starting to implement these programs. But for those folks, if you're on the phone, here's where you can find the description of those activities in your contract. So you've got diversion and rapid exit, kind of an explanation of what it is and what it can be used for, housing navigation and landlord outreach, and tenancy support services. And as you can see, those sections are a lot shorter than the ESG regulation section. We're trying to keep these programs flexible so that they can meet the needs of each individual agency. So yeah, that's that section. All right. The other big change that you are going to see in your contract this year is the addition of Exhibit D, as in dog. And I'm scrolling down. Give me just a second. I pardon. Sorry if this is making anybody a little nauseous. Okay. Well, nope. Okay, Exhibit D. So again, this is going to look a little different for the HPRR, Homeless Prevention and Rapid Rehousing grantees. This is what the HUD TA gave us. This is all about match. So this, if you have any questions about what your ESG match can be, needs to look like, how to report it, you know, what works, what doesn't, what's eligible, what's not, this is going to be your first go-to. We sent this out, and you should have received it earlier this year, but if you haven't, again, let Galen and myself know. We can send you the original document, or, you know, of course, you're going to have your contract sent to you hopefully next Monday, if not sooner. And this will be in there. So basically, I'm not going to read this because that would be a waste of everyone's time, but I do want to just point out a couple of things about match that were the biggest recommendations for us for clarification from our HUD TA. Basically, the biggest thing is that if you aren't funded for an activity in this contract, you cannot use it as match to this contract. So if you're funded for emergency shelter, you can't use, other prevention dollars or rapid rehousing dollars or something like that to provide a match. It's got to be that component to component match. Now, if you have two components, let's say you have emergency shelter and street outreach in this contract, and you have $50,000 that you are now required to provide in match, you don't have to provide a dollar for dollar match. So if the contract that we give you is evenly split and you have $25,000 in shelter, $25,000 in street outreach, you could provide the whole $50,000 of match in your street outreach program if you wanted to. You just wouldn't be able to provide it with, again, prevention, because you're not funded for that through this contract. Same with admin. If you don't have administration in your ESG contract, you cannot use admin to match your ESG. So that, I think, I don't know if we've been as clear about that. That's partly why ICF recommended that we have it as one of our biggest points of clarification. So the easy way that they described it for us is, if ESG shelter and outreach components cannot pay for it, then it is not eligible for match. So if you cannot do something with your contract dollars, you can't match it with your contract dollars. So just a couple of other things. So there's a lot of really great information in here, just so that you guys know. So again, this is just repeating the match. We are going to have a new process and template this year to show match, which we will show you guys in just a second here. I just want to run down and see if there's anything else that we need to clarify. Okay. Yeah, so take a look at this. Again, if you haven't seen it already, let your asset manager or Galen and myself know, and we can send you this this afternoon. But if you have seen it, take another look at it when it comes to you in your contract, and know that we are going to start helping folks and being very intentional about the way that we are monitoring match. Okay. Any questions or anything, Galen?
No, still
okay.
Things that are being able to be answered through chat.
Okay, awesome. All right, so speaking of match, so one of the biggest ways, especially shelters, that folks do match is through volunteers. And so there's just a couple of points of clarification on the volunteer tracking that we want to provide, again, based on that TA that we got. So this will be coming with your executed contract. Once you all execute contracts and they're finalized on our end, your AM will reach out with the scanned version of your executed contract, as well as all of these forms that I'm showing you now, I'm about to show you. This is going to be the ESG volunteer tracking form, volunteer hour tracking form. Again, provided to us from the HUD TA. And basically what this is saying is, if you want to use the volunteer hours as match, we need you to do it in this form. We need you to use this specific form, and there's a couple of reasons for that. So first, we have delineated and added a category here. Again, this is just for the shelter and outreach, so it'll look a little different on the HPRR, but it'll be almost identical. So this is where you can put the activity that the volunteer is performing. So again, if they're not performing something that's not emergency shelter and street outreach eligible, they cannot use that volunteer time as match for your emergency shelter or street outreach program. So we're going to need folks to delineate what activities people are doing so that we can be ensuring that it's match. I know that's a little different than the way that we've done it in the past, and hopefully this won't burden folks, but if it is, a huge burden, we can try and be flexible about it. So reach out to the AM or myself, but this is what was given to us from our HUD TA provider. So there's really not much flexibility that we have here. This is how we have to report back to HUD so that we are covering our bases and ensuring that we are allocating these dollars responsibly. So you have a blank form here. I know it doesn't make sense to have all of this language on the top, of your regular shelter tracking form. So I gave you a blank one here too, just so you guys can use that one. And then here is what, if you want to submit this volunteer tracking form, you'll have to submit the rate rationale as well. And so what the biggest point of clarification that we want to make sure shelters and specifically know about is that you don't have to just rate each volunteer hour based on $5 an hour. The HUD regs actually state that you can value a volunteer hour at what you would pay that person if they were your employee. So if you have, I don't know, a lawyer who comes in to provide free legal services for your shelter, and you would have to pay that person $50 or $75 an hour for those services, you can value that volunteer hour at that rate. But if you're going to do that, we have to have this explanation as to why that rate is chosen and what the job is doing and what you would pay an employee for the job that they're doing. So we don't want you to have to do this for every single volunteer who signs in and out. So what this form is for is if you have, let's say, you have people who come in and drive the van consistently and they transport your folks, or you have people who come in and provide meals consistently, right? You can write those activities here in this column, and then you can tell us in one go what that rate is and why. And then all we'll check is that that rate or that activity is the same activity that's here. And that's how we can value your volunteer hours. So yeah, I feel like I'm talking a lot about it. But anyway, if there are questions or concerns, this is a form that looks different than what we've been using in the past. So again, feel free to reach out to us, take a look at that Exhibit D in your contract. Hopefully that will clarify there is a section specifically about volunteer tracking that will clarify that for you. And again, there's an empty one here if you guys need to use that. All right, Ms. Galen, any questions?
No.
Okay.
We're still doing pretty well.
Cool.
I just want to make sure that, okay, yeah, never mind, I'm through.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. And if you guys get that and look at it and again have questions, I mean, feel free to reach out to us. Like I said, this is the first year that we're doing some of these forms, so we know that change is hard, and we want to make sure that we're supportive of that as much as we can be. Okay, so this is going to be the new financial status report. So this is the report that you all submit quarterly along with your pay request that looks at exactly, what's been spent down and what you still have in the budget. Again, this language here will look a little bit different for HPRR folks. This is the outreach and services financial status report, but it will format-wise look almost identical. So folks, for bonus funds, we do have a section here. And then that's where you can put in your bonus fund information, but since bonus funds are state dollars and not ESG dollars, you don't have to do as much of the, the match and the ESG total and all of that. We moved that out separately. So any of these boxes that are grayed out are formatted, and they're locked. So you won't be able to change these, you won't be able to mess these up or anything like that. But you will put in your information here in these white boxes, and then, oh, sorry. That's okay. Yeah, of course. You will be filling out these white boxes, and that is where the information that you guys will put in will go. But this really shouldn't look that different from last year's report. Hold on one second, Kayla. Sorry, I need to.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Sorry, we're trying to.
We have one mouse and we're trying to do a couple different things. Sorry, everybody. All right, so this is the section that's going to look a little bit different. So this is where we're going to document and track the match commitment. So in the application process, you guys told us what your match was going to be for the year. And so what we are going to do is work with you all to track that in this financial status report. I believe, correct me, well, you can't speak back up, but I might be wrong on this, so take this with a grain of salt. I believe we've only been asking for match documentation at the end of the year, and we will be changing that this year. You need to submit your match documentation every quarter. Now, you don't have to spend 25% of your match each quarter. We realize that some agencies aren't even open all year. Some are just winter shelters. some folks do their match at the very end or at the very beginning, and it's flexible for people. So we're not asking people to, have 25% of your match spent down by the end of quarter one, but we do want to know where you are on your match at the end of each quarter. So there's a little bit of language here, just kind of explaining what this document is for, et cetera, et cetera. Again, it's mostly just pointing back to that match document in FAQ. Yes, so that's what that is. And so again, here, these grayed out boxes are locked. And so what we're going to have you all put in is this information here. So that is what you guys can put in. You don't have to have 5 match sources. We just added 5 rows here, but you can insert rows and have as many match sources reported as needed. The other change is that when you tell us about the match, we're just going to ask that you tell us, oh, this is from the grant, the Colorado Health Foundation grant that we had listed in our match. So you can put that name here. And then here, for the type of match, you actually have a drop down. So you can pick between these 3. You've got cash, which would be a federal grant or a local grant or a private donation or something like that, some sort of cash that is spent down on your ESG program. You have in-kind, so any kind of in-kind donation or anything like that. You can have that here, or volunteer hours. And again, the volunteer hours will be tracked in more detail on that other spreadsheet. But that's what that is. So it's not going to let you type anything here. It's just you just can't see the drop down unless you're highlighting the cell. So I did just want to click on that. And then just 2 more quick things on this form. So here's a box. If your match changes over the year, that's fine. As long as you're able to, replace it or tweak it so that it's an eligible match, that is absolutely fine. We just are asking that you tell us what that is. So we're not expecting, $20,000 from Grant A when you're actually getting $20,000 from Grant B. And then we have, this section here that's a little bit of the narrative about the match. And again, this was the other piece of TA that we got that they really suggested that we clarify. So if you are reporting on match in this quarter, it has to be spent down. The money that you're reporting has to be spent down. The in-kind donations that you're reporting have to be donated, and the volunteer hours that you're reporting have to be provided in the quarter. So, that's, of course, we're looking year across the year. So if there's some flexibility between quarters, that's less important. But the big trick is, it doesn't necessarily matter when you got, Grant A, for example, as long as you spent Grant A within the contract timeframe. Or if your volunteers are providing volunteer hours for your match, or you got in-kind donations for your match, that has to have been given to the agency within the contract timeframe. And again, you can add more rows as needed in this section. And you don't have to have 5 match sources each quarter. That's just what we kind of the average that we think most folks will be able to fill in all of their match in 5, but if you need more or less, totally fine. And so then these 2 boxes, just really quickly, explain what was bought, donated, or provided. Again, just making sure that those things are ESG eligible and are being used for ESG eligible activities. And then here, how was that match used for an ESG activity? It can be as simple as we got 3 weeks worth of food donated and we used that in our shelter. It can really be that simple. We're just looking for what that looks like. And this won't provide necessarily any additional backup documentation than what you've already been providing. So like if you had a grant, I know historically we've been providing the award letters for the grants and things like that. This is just a little more narrative explanation of how the match got spent and allocated to the program.
Can I jump in?
Absolutely.
Hi, everyone. This is Galen, who had been behind a computer or a keyboard, but realized that those answers were going just to the panelists. So I'm going to adjust that visual right now so it can go to all attendees. Those 2 questions, obviously, that you had seen, mostly about when the contracts need to be signed, when you should receive them, and then at what time do we need to submit them back with a signature. Kim, I appreciate you jumping in on that and answering it. And then the other one, I'm just going to kind of copy and paste the responses that I have provided, and I'm sorry that didn't go up to everybody. but just wanted to circle back and apologize for that little technical challenge.
Yeah, we're dealing with a new webinar system, so give us some grace. This is the first time we've used this one. All right, yeah, and Kim, just to clarify, Kim, thank you for pointing that out. You will get the contracts that you need to sign on Monday, not the executed contracts. I don't know if that's what you're talking about. But,
yeah, the ones that they would need to sign.
Right.
Then I think there was 2 questions around that same topic of when they can expect to receive it. So
cool.
Being Monday the 23rd. Ideally, if we can just get those back as soon as possible, but also probably no later than March 27th. That's really what the time frame is. There was another response also that I see I had sent, just because if for some reason there are any difficulties in getting that, I just suggest, let's see, I'm just going to copy and paste this answer that I had because encouraging you all to be in touch with your ESG contacts if there is any issues around not being able to submit that signed contract back to DOH in the time frame that I mentioned. So thank you again.
Yep. Okay, and then the executed contracts will come after they're executed, obviously. AMs will send that out probably the first week of April with the reporting forms. Although, Kim, I think you're on the line, so let us know if it usually takes longer than that or if that's a different time frame that we're looking at. Okay, I need to pull up one more form, so bear with me for just a second. The other form that we are going to be talking about today is the narrative form. So we do have a section where people can provide a narrative report. So anyone who has ESG has to be using HMIS. So we're not going to be collecting any more data outputs unless they're coming through HMIS. I know last year people were using a narrative, a milestones form, I think is what it technically is called, to provide some of those outputs, you know, this many meals provided, this many households served, et cetera, et cetera. We're doing away with that and having it all be in HMIS this year. And then, of course, for our DV folks on the phone, our domestic provider folks, we will have a workaround since you guys cannot use HMIS. We are in the process of trying to finalize the comparable database, and I know if anybody is on the phone and has been involved in that conversation, you're probably rolling your eyes at this point because that's what people have been saying for about 3 years now, I think. But it's very complicated, but it does feel like we're getting to a close point where hopefully within this year we will have, knock on wood, something established. So we will be sending you guys the form to use between now and having that established, again with those reporting forms. But anyone else who is not serving domestic violence victims must be in HMIS. So that's why we took out the output measurement in the reporting form that I now have pulled up on the page. So you still have your milestones. So this is just a tracking mechanism, honestly, to make sure that folks have you know, all of the fun bureaucratic stuff in place. You've got your quarterly reports. If you need any assistance with HMIS, you've got this here. The one thing that we are changing is this one, the 504 self-evaluation to CDOH. That is about, I believe it's about accessibility and ADA requirements, but we are moving that one into the application process. So we actually want folks to be able to provide that in the application process next year. We didn't catch that early enough this year. So I believe folks who are current grantees, the date for this one is it's December 31st or something like that. But we changed it this year to bring it up to the end of the first quarter. So by the end, when you do your reporting for the first quarter, we want to see that self-evaluation as well. But do know that next year, that will be part of the application process. Did you want to say something?
No.
Okay. And then we do love hearing the narrative stuff too, and the success stories and the things that HMIS data doesn't do a great job of telling. So we have some sections here for just a little bit of a narrative report too, right? So they're pretty vague questions. They're intended for you all to be able to tell us what you feel is important for us to know. And I know our AMs love to hear the impact of the work that they do and the contracts that they manage. And so anything that you want to share with us, any accomplishments, moving towards housing first and housing focused, we want to see what that looks like for people. And if there are other questions, if you have like a really specific TA request or a really great idea or anything, feel free to send that stuff to us here. These are the basic questions that we put in for now. And then if you are receiving bonus funds, we want to be really intentional about understanding what it took to set that program up this year. What were the challenges? What could we be doing differently? What can we improve? How are you working with coordinated entry for your bonus funds in order to house people? So folks who have bonus funds, feel free to be very frank here. We're going to be using this kind of as an input for continual feedback on our bonus fund application and granting process. And we're going to be working with you all pretty intently to make sure that in the next round, the bonus funds are set up effectively and that we aren't basically setting folks up for failure in the way that we're administering those dollars. And again, the bonus funds, we aren't going to dive into those today because there's only about 10 agencies who were funded with bonus funds this year. But we will be doing another webinar specifically targeted to folks who have bonus funds in hopefully late or middle April. And that one will be more interactive. Since there's so few of us, I'm interested to hear from folks what questions folks have, what concerns you're having, if any, and getting ready to set these up. So we're still working on the reporting forms and things like that, but it won't be that complex because frankly, our biggest goal with these is to increase housing outcomes of shelters. And so that's a really easy thing that's already tracked in HMIS, and that's really what we're looking for is are these funds increasing permanent housing? If not, why? And how do we target and tailor them to better house people? Okay, let me just check. Galen, anything from your end?
Nothing else has come up.
Okay, cool. So we've got about 20 minutes left, so I'm just going to reiterate a couple of things to make sure that it's explicitly clear for everyone. So Monday, you should see contracts coming through DocuSign. That is the unsigned contract that you will sign and return back to us. I believe the 27th was the deadline that we're thinking. Again, that is a very, very quick turnaround. So please, one, thank you. And please let us know if you are not using DocuSign or if you're not going to be able to sign those contracts electronically. Let either myself and Galen and also specifically your asset manager know today, if you can, if you don't think you'll be able to do that. And then we are working to set up the new grantees in HMIS, and we are also working on updating that domestic violence HMIS sheet as well. The webinar will be available hopefully like next Monday. The link for that, it takes a little while to have it loaded on the cloud and then take it down. But we can send that link out to everyone once we have it. So yeah, we did, since there are some pretty technical changes in this year's process, we did want to leave quite a bit of time at the end for questions and things like that folks have. So I don't have anything specifically. Galen, do you want to talk about the HPRR process in case there are folks on the phone?
Yeah, sure. So it's not a lot different. Obviously, more of the really specific details are going to be more targeted towards prevention and rapid rehousing activities. So again, kind of just like what I had said in the beginning, at this point, I think what's going to be best, because we'll be working with the COCs to administer the contracts to then their grantees. So those will be some one-on-one calls that I will set up with leadership at the different, at Balance of State, Pikes Peak, and MDHI over the next week. That email is going to be going out with the link of this recorded webinar just so that you can share that. And so at that point, I think we'll probably get more into the specifics of any changes that we'll be making with reporting and just different feedback from you all in administering those contracts. So not a whole lot different. I appreciate Cassie covering so much of these different forms and just the whole ramp up to this new contract year. We're really excited with everyone's patience for us to be trying a few different things this year and really getting that ramped up pretty well starting April 1st.
Awesome. Thanks, Kaylin. So open it up to questions. So we've got one from Mark. Looks like match clarification. Volunteer hours, please provide further definition around rate per hour. Would rate pay for, could pay for?
Charges for that rate. Maybe this goes to what we were talking earlier today with the lawyer.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, what we had really understood that would be a big change in receiving some of that TA is that those would equate to the task being provided by the volunteer. So if you were to pay somebody who is working with your agency and administering that task, then the volunteer hour rate would be equivalent to what that duty is. One of the examples, Cassie had kind of helped just as we were getting to the nitty-gritty of this. She had used the example of an attorney doing something that attorney needs to do. We would look at that fee as probably, off the top of my head, I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't either.
So when it comes to the attorney, I was like $50. Yeah, I feel like that's a well-rounded number. But Mark, so does that help just give you a different explanation of how that rate works?
And to the would pay for versus could pay for, right? Like we realize a lot of you guys are nonprofits, so if you would pay a lawyer or a doctor like half of what they would pay in a for-profit industry, like we're not necessarily limiting you to that like budget, like because most of these types of things probably aren't like things that a nonprofit would have. That being said, like we're not gonna, how about this? We're not gonna let you charge like $50 an hour for a driver or for someone to prepare meals and things like that. Like we wanna be flexible here and we're gonna trust your rate rationale, but we are gonna be looking to make sure that like, that there's some reasonability there. Cool.
And I think that as we were learning this, things that do involve more administrative tasks, if that's a volunteer that's answering phones, then we would kind of look at what that would be for hourly wage.
Yeah, and if you want to stick to that minimum, right, like we pay most of the folks who do all of this type of work minimum wage, and you just want to use that as your basis, that's fine too. The biggest point for us is we were undervaluing our volunteer hours because so many folks were using that $5 an hour rate. Now, I do want to make a point of clarification because I know a lot of these agencies utilize AmeriCorps members. And so if you're using your AmeriCorps members to provide this work, and that's the match, because Vista's volunteers in Service to America, they're technically volunteers. If you're using their time as match, that does have to be at volunteer hour, at around $5 an hour, because that's what they're paid, right? So if you have a volunteer, if you have an AmeriCorps member who is driving, and normally you would pay that person minimum, which I think is 12 something now. If they're an AmeriCorps volunteer, you still got to value that at that $5 limit, because that is the rate rationale. That is what they're being paid. So that's the one caveat. Don't let that discourage you from doing AmeriCorps and using AmeriCorps because AmeriCorps is great. Is there another question?
Yeah, so Teresa just wanted to get a clarification in terms of utilizing the volunteer forms that we were showing.
Yeah. So our guidance from ICF was actually that this form, and I'll just pull it back up. This form is the one that has to be used if you want to use your volunteer hours for ESG match. So again, I don't want this to be something that's a burden for people. So if there is just like, this would ruin our volunteer process, reach out and let us know. AMs, if you start to get those types of questions, feel free to shoot them over to us and we can help troubleshoot those. But all of this language on the top, except for that second sentence that says grantees must submit the volunteer rate rationale as well. That all came from our HUD TA provider. So I think there are ways that we can probably be flexible on that to answer your question, Teresa, because I do know that so many of these shelters have such great and streamlined and efficient systems for getting volunteers in and working. But we do, if you're not using like this specific form with our headings and templates and things like that, we do still need at least this information. We need the date, the volunteer name, the activity that they did that matches the activity and the rate rationale that you've provided here, and then the number of hours. So I'm thinking out loud now, but maybe what the compromise looks like is you can take these tables and have them incorporated into the volunteer sign-in. We can work on it on a case-by-case basis if that's an issue for people. But yes, the guidance that we got from ICF was that they have to use the same standard template form. Any other questions, any other concerns, anything like that? And if not, if folks are good to go and want to get back to, crisis management, feel free to hop off. Like I said, we will be sharing this link, posting it online. But Galen and I are here until 2 if anybody does have any questions. And you are welcome, Mark. Thank you for the time and sitting in. And we'll just go to mute now until folks have questions. All right, it looks like most folks are hopping off, and so thanks to all of you as well for taking the time. Again, if there is, anything that we can do, any additional questions that we can answer, I know we're sending out a lot of COVID stuff right now and a lot of just guidance on what to do, but if you guys need anything while you're managing that, let us know. And if you don't see your contracts by Tuesday morning, please reach out to us as soon as possible.
Thank you all for everything that you do. I hope you have a good weekend.
Thanks, guys.